Hi folks, I'm just going to do a follow-up video because my last one cut me off early. Usually my phone records about 30 minutes, but last time for some reason it cut off after 20 minutes or 21 minutes or something. So, I was just explaining how how I had learned the actual nature of Constantinople, the original Constantinople, the Greek Constantinople, and well, I guess it's Roman, right? Greco-Roman Constantinople, via this 4,000-year-old map, because this map has these little circles and things like wherever there's a major peninsula. And so, the biggest one here is Chalkidiki, and then this pretty big one is like Gallipoli, and then these ones are like Corfu, Kefalonia, and Zakynthos. But this one I couldn't understand, like it's right where Istanbul was. But anyway, so I was explaining this in the last video, how it took me so long to figure out in modern, like on Google, was very, I kept Googling like Istanbul Peninsula, and they only want to show me this whole peninsula, the Çatalca, Thracian Peninsula, but they don't, there was nothing about, it was very hard to find anything about this. It took me like weeks, I guess, to find it. So anyway, finally found it, and hopefully now I actually have some photos I can show of it. Well, I guess I already did have photos of it. So yeah, it's like this guy here. So this is just one little section of the European side. It's a one little peninsula on the European side of Istanbul. But this was the original Roman Constantinople. And so anyway, yeah, it's just this little thing right here. So it was tripped me out how I had just thought this whole thing was always Constantinople, and it was on both sides to begin with. But no, apparently the Romans were just on the European side. I mean, they had some outlying Byzantine settlements and holdings on this side, but it wasn't part of Constantinople. And they were captured by the Turks like 100 years before Constantinople was captured. So Constantinople was, set in this perfect place because there's this estuary and these rivers emptying into the Bosphorus here, so it would sail from here anyway. So it's just interesting thing to learn from that. It took me so long to find out. There's no name for this peninsula. There's only an unofficial name, which they call it the Historical Peninsula. So here you can see it right there. And it's on the correct side of, Istanbul for this, because this shows it clearly on the, basically the southeastern side. So that's where it is here. It's on the southeastern side of the tip of Çatalca. And not exactly sure what this shows. Which part? I mean, I'm guessing somehow this is that peninsula, but I'm not sure what this is. I don't know. Not sure what's going on in this. This is like a very early map. Yeah, I don't know. It's all about straits, you know, like these maps, these ancient maps are mostly all about straits, like wherever there's like narrow straits, then whichever land masses cause those straits are then considered to be gatekeepers. All right. Well, that's an interesting one. Thomas Edison said that when a difficult problem was being discussed, Edison said, it was too difficult for any specialist. It would be necessary, he said, to wait for some amateur to solve it. So he's talking about like how experts are dumb, basically. It's always been a problem that there's a lot of pitfalls that befall experts, and part of it is just them being too far up their own ass, and part of it is them just being trained a certain way and not being flexible the way amateurs are to new information. But that's certainly true that amateurs have done a lot of the real heavy lifting in the advancement of science, and they've usually had to do it against the full force of all the experts who said, no, man, there's no atoms, the earth is made, you know, everything is made of ether or whatever it is, you know. Every scientific advancement was always some newbie that was being laughed out and scorned out by all the established scientists that have more experience. So yeah, here it is. So this is like an actual name for it, but it's not like an official, it doesn't seem to be an official name, but this is, they call it the Historical Peninsula of Istanbul. So that's just exciting in itself to find an actual name for something that basically has no name, but at least something I can call it. And these are some early Greek, you know, I was Googling early Greek civilizations, and a lot of these things seem like they could be maps. You know, like this could be a map of some kind of coastline showing different peninsulas. But who knows? Maybe it's just aesthetic. You know, like some of that could be a map of this island, which those paintings were found on, I think. But one thing is clear from like the ancient art is that the original Greeks, because this is from the Mycenaeans or whatever, from Mycenae, they were black, or they were basically black people, just like the Egyptians. They were depicted pretty similar to the Egyptians. So it seems clear that white people came to the Mediterranean at least in large numbers. I think they didn't come until much later. All right, I want to get this video deleted. I do not endorse or do not endorse anything here. These photos are all just for aesthetic purposes. All right, so but the other major thing that I was discussing that also I didn't that I really didn't have a good photo for is this gatekeeper in the American map. So this is the General Seppi version, B1C. This is the main map of America that is illustrated, where the gatekeepers are actually painted on instead of just their names written on. So you can really see, like what a lot of them are. Like this one is the Alaskan Peninsula, like right here. The Alaskan Peninsula is like a little guy hanging on there. This one seems to be the Great Lakes. Although I suppose he could be any number of things. He could also be like somehow somewhat misplaced Hudson Bay. I don't know. I kind of think he's the Great Lakes, but who knows? I think the front leg is the St. Lawrence, Gulf of St. Lawrence, and his back legs are like maybe the Hudson River, and then his body is just all the different Great Lakes. But in terms of real gatekeepers, it's hard to see, but there's like a rabbit here holding a knife, and that's basically seems to be Newfoundland, which actually is shaped like a rabbit, which you can't see too well here, but it kind of has like long ears and a bushy tail and long legs and stuff there. Although it's somewhat iffy to know like if that's the real gatekeeper for this gate, or if would be the other major candidate for it would be Nova Scotia, because Nova Scotia basically plays the same role, because it seems to be oriented for northward sailors, because this right here, Delmarva Peninsula, that's Delmarva, yeah. Delmarva Peninsula here seems to be the next gatekeeper down, or the next to the south, and so it seems to be assuming a northward passage, because this would only like really catch you if you're sailing north. If you're sailing south, you would just pass by it probably. If you're sailing north, you could get stuck in Chesapeake Bay and like lose the coast basically if you're trying to sail along the coast. So by the same token, though, this would be definitely could be, or it basically is a gatekeeper of sorts, or an a guardian of sorts. This is Nova Scotia, because if you sail up here, then you could be stuck in here. But this being very close to the coast is also an coastal obstruction. So they're basically both gatekeepers or guardians, and it's hard to know exactly which is the one. I'm leaning towards this being the gatekeeper of the whole gate, and this just being another nearby obstruction, or these obstructions were called guardians and achs, AKH. So anyway, like that's like how all these work. But this one right here, it lists it as the guardian of the two gods. So anyway, I determined that it's probably this peninsula jutting out from southeastern Yucatan in Mexico. But now I finally have some like photos to actually show that, because that's where the text is written. So I finally found like a name. Again, this is just like the peninsula that Istanbul was on, or I mean, you know, the original Constantinople was on. There's no official name for either of these peninsulas, but there's an unofficial name, like a new name that they came up for for tourism's sake, which is Costa Maya. So I'm sure the Mayans have a name for this peninsula, and it's kind of arbitrary where you begin the peninsula. If you could say that this whole thing is the peninsula, or if you just start it like right here. But for the sake of being called Costa Maya, it's this whole thing. But that works. And originally it included this island and Burgers Key, but then the Mayans dug a canal right here, so they made this like smaller. You know, clearly they understood that it was an that it was a guard, an obstruction to sailing, and so they put a canal right through it, probably thousands of years ago. And so anyway, that seems like it is this Pillars of Hercules. So I'm thinking that is the illustrated one. So this guy right here, that basically his body, I think of him as a squirrel. I don't know what he is, but his body is like the mainland coast, and his at least the bottom part of his knife is this, and maybe the top part is this. So he's holding a knife, and it's like there's more of it, whereas every other gatekeeper, their knives, you know, the handle doesn't hang down from their knives. And the only real different one is this one, who has a dagger pointing down, which is Delmarva Peninsula. So I think this is kind of a similar gatekeeper to this one, where it includes like the mainland, just as this one, his body includes the mainland, but then the knife is the peninsula. So in this case, the knife seems to be Costa Maya. So, you know, because this is basically the Yucatan, and these are the two gods, Hispaniola and Cuba, and this guardian is called the guardian of the two gods, or the protector of the two gods, because again, the whole system is oriented for somebody sailing north on the east coast and south on the west coast. So if they're sailing north, they can get stuck in Chetumal Bay. And then, but luckily the Mayans gave them an easy way out of the canal there. So, but anyway, so they could be sailing along the coast trying to get to Cuba. And then that thing like could stop them, and could they'd be sailing trying to get to here. They'd be like, la la la, I'm just gonna sail, because like it's easier to sail along the coast than just sail on the open sea. You don't get lost. It's calmer waters usually. So you'd be sailing along here, sailing here, and you're almost to Cuba. But then oh, here it is right here. So this is that Costa Maya. So you're almost to Cuba, but then you end up in Chetumal Bay. All right, so that's that. I'm just glad that there are actual names for these little peninsulas. because there are ancient names for them. These ancient maps have names for these peninsulas, so it's kind of weird that modern inhabitants hadn't had any official names for them, but at least they have unofficial names. So there's Costa Maya. So I guess Costa Maya is this section, and then Riviera Maya is like this beyond, the kind of north eastern section of or tip of the Yucatan. Mm-hmm. Well, this is interesting. Celt. It seems that Celt. There's this is in Wikipedia, that some people say that it might be related to the Germanic word hell, and that because they claim to be descended from. He suggests it meant the people are descendants of the Hidden One, noting the Gauls claimed descent from an underworld god. Dawn, I think, is the name of the underworld god. So that could even be, so if that's the origin of the word Celt, that could even be the origin of the word Hellenic too, because that's like the Greeks, the Hellenes of Hellas. Could be that they either were associated themselves with the underworld, as many people did, or that they saw Greece as kind of the gateway to the underworld from the Black Sea and from the Levant and Anatolia and so forth. Dawn. So this is Dawn, the Dark One from Proto-Celtic, is an ancestor of the Gaels. So the Gaels are like the Irish and the Scots and not sure if there's anybody else. Maybe the Manx. I don't know. That's interesting. What was this saying? Oh yeah, this was suggesting that the word for, it seemed that in Egyptian, the word for black hair, or for gray-haired and white-haired, are the same. Skemi. So it means, i.e., to have lost blackness. So that would make sense why the Britain would be called or translated by Lesko, the ancient Egyptian name of Britain would be called gray-headed one, the gray-haired one, when really it's referring to the White Cliffs of Dover, because you can translate this word either way. You can call it white-haired, gray-haired. It's basically the same thing. So anyway, that's interesting. Oh yeah, so the Ilha Grande de Gurupa seems to be the other island. This seems to be the gatekeeper, one of the gatekeepers in Eastern South America. So this is the mouth of the Amazon. And this is a huge island here called Marajo. I even wonder it might have inspired the name America, because America was originally only applied to South America. So maybe they met the Marajo people, and who knows. So Marajo is here, and then Gurupa, Ilha Grande de Gurupa, is here. So they're both part of the Marajo archipelago, and they're both the two largest islands of it by far. The rest of these are significantly smaller. So I think this is the one who's called he whose two faces are opposed in dirt or in dung, which I had confused as being I had thought it was maybe the Falklands, because the Falklands are down here. This deity, you can kind of see it here. And there's like a I don't know, there's like a snake that like seems to connect these to where the text for the text about the he who's two faces or whatever. So I thought it was like pointing to this, to the Falklands, which is also two islands. And it could even be that the Seppi or whoever made this was also confused about the identity and was also thinking that the two faces were the Falklands. I don't know. But now I'm thinking that it's probably the Marajo archipelago, because that would be an actual gatekeeper that's right on the coast. Whereas the Falklands are further out. I also got to memorize that this Delaware Peninsula is called Delmarva. I keep calling it Delmira for some reason. Anyway, Delmarva. Another thing is I learned from my mom how to pronounce. I was telling her about some of this because she's from Ithaca, New York. So I was telling her about Ithaca, Greece on these maps. And but she was the one who actually told me that I was pronouncing this wrong. Like this, I was calling it Gallipoli because that's how it's kind of spelled. But she informed me that it's actually Gallipoli. So learning from the ancestors. And let's see. Also been learning. Oh, and these are the people that lived on Marajo Island and probably around there. Marajorca people or something like that. And something about Scotland. I'm realizing that the deity who is seems to be Britain. He seems to be like he's holding Ireland, or seems to be holding Ireland. So I think his arm is Kintyre and whatever is the thing next to Kintyre. So yeah, I think maybe his arm is Kintyre, and basically the whole, like, I forget what the other thing is. Like this is Kintyre, and then this is called like something else. But basically this whole thing is like a long ass peninsula, and it's the closest part of Britain to Ireland. So I'm pretty sure that that is the arm of Britain here, and that this wand or whatever is Ireland. And these are like the Shetlands, the Orkneys, and the Hebrides, or something like that. Or it's possible it could even be the Faroe Islands and the Shetlands and the Orkneys or something. Who knows? Although Faroes are a bit further. And then, let's see, I was memorizing the Japanese islands that form the snake of that's next to Kamchatka, or I guess it's not Japanese islands, they're just the Kuril Islands. So anyway, it's like, see if it cuts me off before I can do this, but basically, like, there's one little one called Shumshu, and then there's that long one. The long one here is called